So many people are complaining about the property market right now. The prices are very high. It's really difficult to do deals. However, I believe in this market, there are three opportunities that you are probably missing right now. When it comes to making the most amount of money from property, I've done this predominantly either by changing the volume on a building or changing the use of a building. If you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your property investing journey. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button to get more content just like this. What is planning permission and why is it so important? Well, planning permission really is an area of law, and our job is not to be an expert in an area of law. Frankly, that's what the planning consultants are for. However, our job is to have a broad understanding of how it works so we can best utilize and benefit from it. If you think about the power of planning and how much of an impact it has in property, so take a parcel of land for example, it may be worth very little. However, if there's planning permission on that property, say to build 27 houses, all of a sudden the value of that land goes through the roof. But what is it that's different? It's the same piece of land, nothing physically has changed, except a piece of paper that now gives you consent to be able to build. And this is the power of planning permission. This is what planning gain is. This is the uplifting value or forced appreciation that can happen simply by changing the use of a property and how it works. Now, if you've ever made an application for planning, be it a little extension at the back of the house or whether it's a major scheme, you know it can be slow, frustrating, complex, such a headache. And you know, sometimes you just really want to pull your hair out because it's so frustrating going through that process. However, the rewards at the end can be potentially very high. However, what if there was a way to be able to get those huge rewards that you get from planning without going through the pain? This currently exists. It's permitted development rights and prior approval. They're both slightly different, but essentially what they do, these are rights that are attached to land and property in order for you to be able to make changes to those without going to the full planning process. So what this means is there's certain things you can do to be able to add value to a property, but you don't have to go through that full planning process. It's really understanding which one of these are really going to be able to help you. So let me give you a couple of examples of ones that I've done. So for instance, I would take a family house, which is a 3-story Victorian house, and I want to create it into a nice big spacious HMO. So as a family house, I can extend at the back of the property, I can convert the loft on the property to give me that volume that I need, and then after I've done that I can turn it into a HMO. If however I was to take that house and say, look, I want to do all these extensions and turn it into a 6-bedroom HMO, then I'd have to go through planning. However, by understanding the process, it means I can take the family house under permitted development, do the extensions that I want to do, so create that volume, then be able to turn it into a HMO, which is also permitted development, which is changing the use of the property. Now it's done in 2 steps to be able to get what I want. So by just understanding that and not making a full planning application, it means now I don't necessarily have the resistance. It doesn't necessarily mean that the council wouldn't have supported that HMO planning application in the first place. It just means I don't have to wait to go through that process or even get their approval by doing it in this particular way. So I get the result without going through the pain. Another example would be, let's say I'm going to buy a property to renovate and sell, and what I'm looking for is to be able to push up the ceiling value of that particular property, which is really going to be created by the street. And one I've done recently, we'll link it up here for you to have a look at, where we've done huge extensions on that, really to be able to make it a much bigger house. Taking a 2-bedroom, turn it into a 4-bedroom house, but ultimately all of it was done under permitted development. It meant that we didn't have to go through planning. In fact, on that particular property, what we did, we made a planning application for an extension, which was a larger extension, but at the same time we submitted a permitted development notice essentially to say we're going to put a smaller extension on. Essentially what we're saying to the planners is, look, if you give us planning permission, we'll build that extension. If you don't, we're going to build the smaller one anyway because we're allowed to do it. And in that particular case, they didn't give us planning permission, but we were still able to achieve the volume, the result that we ultimately wanted by going through the permitted development routes. So it's understanding where this opportunity lies. This is something I believe many property investors are underutilizing. These tools are available to us, but so few tend to utilize them. Here is the sweetener. Last year, Boris Johnson, in his famous Bill speech, announced his recovery plan and what he decided that he was going to make it easier to be able to build and create new homes, and started to relax some of the rules as we know them to make it easier for us. Very few people really fully understand this. In fact, there's just so much out there. There's so many opportunities that are now being created. It's really about understanding them. So where are these opportunities? When I flash this text up on the screen, think about it for a moment. What is it that you actually see? What is it that you can read on that screen? What you might be able to read is opportunity is nowhere. However, some people may be reading this as opportunity is now here. It's the same words, but a different perspective on the same thing. And this is exactly the situation when we look at property. Some people walk past a property every day, see there's no opportunity there, and somebody else may walk across that same property, walk past it and think, I can see an opportunity here. So which way are you seeing the opportunities around you? Are you missing them, or are you spotting them? And can you see how you can connect the dots? Hey, let's just pause your viewing pleasure there just for a moment. If you're enjoying this content, then it would really help me if you would smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and enable the notification bell. This way YouTube will let you know where these videos have been released, and it will also help me reach more people just like you, so we can get the message out there and help many more people get further faster in their property investing journey. I believe right now the market presents 3 opportunities for you to be able to utilize, particularly when we're talking about permitted development prior approval. Now, if you're in a crowded room, or in a very busy room, or a concert, and you're struggling to see what's going on at the front, you may tiptoe, you might stand on your toes and say, I could just about see over everybody else's head, and now you have a slight advantage. However, when the other people look around and think, maybe I should stand on my toes and maybe I can see over everybody else's head as well. And you start seeing other people start to do that. And then before long, you look around and pretty much everybody's on their toes. What does that do? It takes away the advantage, because you are no longer in a position where you have that little advantage. And that's the opportunity that exists right now, because in a year's time, 2 years' time, this opportunity won't exist. And this is exactly what happened to office to residential conversions. When they were first introduced, very few people understood what they were and how they worked. And the early adopters made a huge amount of money from those, but the latecomers to the party were really paying premium to be able to buy those buildings, because other people along the process, if you like, had realized what the opportunity was and started building in the margins for them. It meant that there was less money for the people who were coming in late to the party. So don't miss the opportunity to utilize these, and think about how you can use them for yourself. Opportunity number 1 is utilizing airspace above houses, bungalows, and blocks of flats. When I first heard about these, I was just absolutely flabbergasted at what was possible. Why? Because it just sounds crazy, but the opportunity now exists. Earlier on, I was talking about a house which you could buy, renovate and sell on. You don't need planning permission. You extend at the back. You maybe convert the loft, make it bigger, put a dormer at the back. You're now creating so much more space and more volume in that particular property. But you couldn't, for example, let's say you wanted to extend upwards and say, right, we're going to go beyond the roof line and put a story above it, because that would require planning permission, and often it looks a little bit weird. It's outside of the street scene, as it were. But these things are now become all part of the new changes that are happening, which means we can now take, for example, a standard house. You can take the roof off that house and build 2 stories above it. So you've got a 2-story house, you build 2 more stories on top, effectively creating 4 stories, and put the roof back on. That's huge. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to do that. Maybe you might only extend it by 1 more floor, but just the fact that you can go up and create more space in that building that doesn't exist right now, and in places where the values are quite high, this is going to be a game changer. Now, this may not work in those cheaper towns like Dudley. If you live in Dudley, I'm sorry, I invest in Dudley. I think it's a great location, but the values are poor, they're suppressed. The values are quite low. It's not going to be viable to make that investment, to make that change. However, if you're in a high value area, say some of the outer skirts and the suburbs of Birmingham, where the values are quite high, and you can take that property and put a story on top of it, you significantly change that property and the value of that property. Now, there are going to be some conditions around this. It's not a case of just taking any property and just go and do this. As I said, you need to have enough knowledge to understand this, have an overview, then have the right people around you to make sure you're delivering these results. And this is something we're definitely focusing on this year. One of the key things you need to look out for is when the property was built. So the property needs to be built between 1948 and 2018. If it's outside of that period, in fact, the specific dates, But if you're outside of that period, it's not going to be, it's not something you're going to be able to do for this. So if you're, for example, a big fan of the Victorian houses like I am, unfortunately you can't take a Victorian house and do this to it, but there are going to be so many other ones that you absolutely can. Big opportunity number 2 is repurposing retail space into residential. So what's this mean? Now, if you look at the market in terms of what's happening and generally the economy right now, we're going through a little bit of a mini boom in the property market. However, there are a number of problems that are effectively festering away that we've just kicked down the road. So there are many businesses that are probably struggling, and there's many that are probably not even viable right now, although they still exist in their legal form, as it were. But when businesses start reopening, as we start coming out of the lockdowns, as the furlough schemes start to end, as bounce back loans need to be starting to be repaid, and various other sports starts disappearing, what you'll find is some of these businesses will just throw in the towel and think it's just not viable anymore, it doesn't make any sense to run these businesses anymore, and they'll just call it a day. And many retail businesses, you'll see the high street start to change. You'll see some of the shops that were there for many years will no longer be viable. They won't exist anymore. If you think about some of the things that you buy on a day-to-day basis right now that you've probably switched to buying online. The reason Jeff Bezos is probably the richest person in the world is because we've switched our buying habits in terms of how we're buying, and this is having a big effect on the high street. So as this starts to change and this effect starts to happen, we've seen the Arcadia Group, one of the biggest retail groups in the country, disappear, kind of fold, and all those shops are now going to become available as well. You've got to think about, is there opportunity to take those and repurpose them to residential use? Some of this is going to be possible because the changes to the use classes that have happened. So previously you might be familiar with, say, C3 is a family dwelling, a C4 is a HMO, A1 is a shop, A3 is a cafe or a restaurant. So you might have heard of these terms before, and these are the classifications that properties fall under in terms of what they're allowed to be used for. So what's happened recently is many of these ones have been reclassified and put into a category E. So for example, your A1, 2, 3, your shops, cafes, restaurants, financial institutions like estate agency shops, things like that, all of those have been recategorized, nurseries, gymnasiums, and a few others as well. They've been put into what's called this new category E, including shops as well, which is what we're talking about right now. And what that means is we are now able to take those properties and turn them into residential use. Now, sometimes it may make sense to be able to do that by taking a property and turning it into residential because the numbers work. However, we've got to be pragmatic and realistic about this in terms of where it's actually going to work. So for example, if you have a busy high street and you've got a lot of people, a lot of footfall on that high street, it's not going to make sense to turn that shop front into a flat. It just isn't going to be very appealing for somebody to want to live there. It's not going to be ideal. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So what you've got to think about is how can you take a building like that where you can utilize parts of the building and turn it into residential, but maybe end up with a smaller element of retail that still can be repurposed. Because here's the thing, you still need to go to the high street to do certain things. You can't drink coffee through Amazon right now. Maybe that will change at some point, because there'll be some things that's still an experience that people will go to do, getting your hair cut, for example. So these kind of shops, there'll still be a need for, but it will probably be very different from some of the ones we had before. What's happened to all the book shops, the clothes shops, the DVD shops? These are all kind of disappearing, if not already disappeared. And so these are the ones that we want to think about repurposing and think about who is going to be the new potential tenant in those buildings. And this will enable you to increase the value quite significantly of retail property right now that is not very popular, is not very desirable. Opportunity number 3 is a twist on number 2, which is rather than taking commercial property and turn it partially into residential, i.e. mixed use, you take commercial property and turn all of it into residential. Where would you want to do that? Well, for example, let's say you're looking at a small industrial unit on the edge of where there's already residential. Let's say it's a gymnasium where the building lends itself to be able to convert. Again, you have to look at the numbers of where this works. All of these, just a caveat, the things I'm talking about right now, you really need to analyze the numbers and make sure that the numbers stack up and it works quite well. So often what you'll find is commercial property is significantly lower value than that of residential. Let's say you take a commercial building, let's say it's like a light industrial warehouse, for example, and you want to take that and convert that to residential. You might look at that and say, well, I could probably create 8 apartments from here, 1-bedroom apartments. Now, if you're going to go through the full planning process, they'll probably ask you to put a mixture of different type of apartments in. Might be some studios, some 1 bed, some 2 beds, having to comply with certain things. This way, doing this under permitted development and prior approval, it means that you don't necessarily need to go through all those steps, and you can bypass that to create what you want. You get to choose how you want that mix to work. So let's say you're going to create 8 one-bedroom apartments. Let's say you're going to spend about £20,000 to create each one. So what's that? You've spent £120,000 to do a conversion. Let's say the building's about £300,000 to purchase in the first place. So what you're up to about £420,000 spend to buy this building and convert the apartments to end up with 8 units. That's costing you a total of £420,000. When we look at the value of those properties once they've been completed, so let's say you've got 8 apartments and that's cost you a total of 420,000, which means there's roughly about £52,000 a flat. It might be that they're worth about 100 or 120,000 pounds each. When you look at it like that, your profit margin as a percentage is huge. It's just not possible to do those kind of developments right now where you go through the process, you add the value through full planning. It's really, really difficult to make those kind of profit margins. However, because you're bypassing the most difficult hurdle, which is planning, the rest of it is just going and implementing as long as your numbers are right. This works really well. Now, again, I'm going to use Dudley as an example, but even if you're buying really low value property, commercial property, and you do this conversion, it may be the end value of the apartments is still quite low. So it doesn't actually make sense. So again, this is going to work really well where you've got more higher values, or the residential properties are near more expensive properties that you can benefit from those higher prices. So this is really important to think about what's the end value going to be of the development rather than just rushing out and do it. And again, depending on the location, you're not going to want to do this in a place where people are not going to want to live. So the location is going to be absolutely important as well. Remember this, all the things I'm talking about now, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. So you need to look at where the numbers are going to work, where overall the project's going to be viable for you to be able to make money from it. But when you think about these 3 strategies that we're speaking about, all of them will give you massive uplifts in value without going through all the pains of planning permission. If you've been watching my videos for any period of time, then you'll know that I'm straight talking, no nonsense when it comes to these things. So let's just lay the cards on the table. This is not going to be easy, but it's considerably easier than going through the full planning process. And the opportunity is now, i.e. not in 2 years' time, but now. So think about how you can utilize some of these things where you're based or close to where you are. And if you want some help, reach out. There's a couple of different ways I can help. That's either through support in terms of mentoring, hand-holding you, or maybe you've got funds to invest and you want to partner with me in terms of projects that we're doing. Either way, just reach out to us and I'm happy to have a chat and see what we can do to help you get further faster in your property investing journey. When I first started learning about property about 15 years ago, what I found very quickly was there are just so many different ways to make money from property. But I also realized it wasn't going to be possible to learn from all these strategies, implement all of them and get great results. No, it doesn't work. It's only through hard work of trying different things and finding that the best way to get results is by focusing on one thing, doing that really well, mastering that skill and getting the results. And that really made the difference for me when I put the blinkers on and stopped getting distracted by all these other opportunities and shiny pennies around me, focused on one strategy until I did that really, really well. And that's what started to make the difference for me and started to get great results. So as you're learning about these things, as I said, this opportunity exists right now. So you want to make sure you benefit from it now and don't leave this too long. Reach out to us if we can help you. So what I've got lined up next for you over here is a video that YouTube tells me that you're really going to enjoy. But just before you go over and watch that, make sure you click on my face just here, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So I look forward to seeing you on this next video just over here.